There's nothing wrong with wanting to be married and wanting to raise a family. I think that that's a natural human emotion. It's a natural feeling. We're groomed as a child. If you were fortunate enough to have a mother and father live under the same roof and raise you, and I can tell you, brothers and sisters, that is a blessing today. That a mom and dad who bring forth the child both live under the same roof and raise that child from the time they come until the time they leave. If you see that, you see an example. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be married, wanting to have a wife, wanting to have a husband, wanting to raise a family. We have to know, though, that that should not get in the way of what Father is calling you to do. I now, and let me say this for all of you brothers and sisters out there who ain't married and you're contemplating getting married. Forget dates. Do an interview. This is a job. Here's the job description. I wish I knew what I'm saying then. Because it's not about how pretty you are or how stacked you are or whatever the case may be. The fact of the matter is that you need to know, and before you talk about getting married, you better know what you're called to do. You better know your calling before you talk about getting connected to somebody. I don't care if you go to the same church. Because just because you go to the church, that don't mean nothing. Amen. You better know your calling. Yes, sir. Many people calling don't come until after they get married. Why they get married first? Because of that nature, that human nature, that animal instinct. Do you know that animal instinct is to procreate? It's a natural animal, and we're all animals. It's to procreate. To procreate means you have sex. And you got a lot of folks out there just want to have sex. That's their goal, is to get some. And the result of getting some is a baby that they weren't ready for. And they abandon it. And then somewhere along the line, they find somebody they want to get married to and spend the rest of their life with. And they find that person. And then they calling come. And they come to realize that the person they married and their calling ain't compatible. You hear what I'm saying, folks? So if you're out there and you ain't married yet, you need to think about your marriage as a business. So, brother, why are you always thinking about? Well, because it is. It's a business proposal. And that's what the vows are for, folks. The vows is a legal binding agreement. And that's why when you make that legal binding agreement, they want you to sign on the dotted line. Because now you got a contract that has to be notarized and put in files that now if you want out, you got to go through the legal process of getting out. It's a contract. It's an agreement. It's a covenant. It's a business agreement. You better have an interview. And sometimes you might need to have follow-up interviews. Just like companies. Because they tired of hiring you, training you, and then you go and be with somebody else. folks. I'm telling you, y'all can laugh at me if you want to. But those of y'all who've been in this thing for a while, or some of y'all who've been in it a few times, you say, man, you know what? That's a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? You better think it through, folks. So if you're going to go down that road, you better make sure that you have an idea of what you're called to do, because the last thing you want, because now you got to work through it. And you know, I heard this so many times in my life. I ain't married no preacher. I ain't married no preacher. I ain't married no preacher. Well, that's what you got. You got a preacher. Well, I ain't married no preacher. Well, you got a preacher now. So I wasn't a preacher when I got married. I was called to preach, but I hadn't answered my calling. You see. I'm telling you some stuff. You better hear what I'm saying. When I did the teaching on marriage, divorce, and remarriage, it wasn't for those folks who've already been through the process. It's for those folks who are not yet there. So you don't make the mistakes many of us have made. Marriage is for life. Should be done one time. Once. So for those of you who ain't done it yet, because for those of you who have, you know, there ain't no exit plan for you. Of course, you figure out your own exit plan anyway. But this is Father's plan. So you better make sure you know what you're getting into before you get into it. Paul said it this way in chapter 7, 1 Corinthians. But this I say, brethren, time is short. It remaineth that both they that have wives be as though they had none. What is he saying? It's not for you to abandon your wife or your husband. It's for you to embrace your calling. It's for you to embrace your calling. How you going to raise your child? Torah. How you going to raise your child? Torah. Well, what if my wife don't want to raise child by Torah? You got the wrong wife. You got the wrong wife. Well, what if I'm married and she don't? Well, you know, you got to figure that out. I'm not talking to the married. I'm talking to the unmarried. You better have it figured out before you sign the dotted line. And make sure that as you go forward, this is how we're going forward. Are we in agreement? Sign right there. What do you mean you want out? Here's the document. This is what we agreed to. We didn't go into some courthouse or in some church house and say some ambiguous vows that neither one of us took to heart. You hear what I'm saying?